Hi guys, welcome to episode 2, where I'm going to focus on quick explanation about the concepts of monolith, how to move from one kind of monolith architecture to modular architecture, very in general. Again, this is more of like how modern systems evolve, right? So the real impact that we can bring in. So I'm going to make it simple. I'm pretty sure there's a lot of content out there, but this is for leaders who are trying to build something from scratch and get on to brushing up the concepts in general, right? So monolith versus microservices, right? You have heard the debate 100 times probably, and there are many videos and articles over there. But the real challenge isn't choosing one. It's knowing how systems evolve from one to the other. Right? So in this episode, I will walk you through how systems transition from monoliths to modular architectures. What decisions matter at each stage, you know, and how engineering leaders can guide the evolution without slowing down your business, right? And so, what exactly is a monolith? It's a single code base, usually sharing one DB, often one deployment pipeline. And simple to build initially, but it gets harder to scale as you evolve with your organizational structure, right? So common pain points that you can notice is it's tightly coupled services, the deployment risk, team scaling challenges involved point of view. So as I speak through, let me share quickly a diagram that will help you understand the concept that briefing here. What I mean. Right. So if we look at the way the monolith is structured, right? Um, in terms of single code base, sharing single DB, one deployment pipeline, right? All the individual modular utilities into one code base. So the common pain points you could imagine is these services that are embedded in one repo or one monolithic architecture, they're really tightly coupled, and there's a lot of deployment risk involved, and there's a lot of team scaling challenges involved. It's hard to onboard any new developers, right? Example, if you consider in this example, right, an e-commerce app where you have different order logic, there's authentication logic involved, there's payment processing logic involved, and there's the inventory management logic involved, all in single repo. So any change requires full deployment, right? Irrespective, you have change in authorization, or payments inventory, or and you make one single change in order logic flow, you still need to manage the validation, regression, and the integration tests and make sure the deployment goes through or goes through without regressions for all services. When it comes to microservices, it's the reality that you can build up to versus not just the promise, right? Because it offers independent deployment, the authentic ownership that you can actually promise through, and the scaling factor. Uh, but yes, it does introduce some latency depending on how you tune your microservice. But observability complexity and like at the same time, you have to monitor a lot of multiple microservices, right? API versioning, deployment coordination, all of it need to be managed, but it can be managed individual service level instead of all comprised one big monolithic design of multiple services involved. So another thing is anti-pattern, right? So the premature decomposition or managing the complexity without solving the original problem cannot be the case, right? So you need to work on your trade-offs. Why microservices versus not monolithic? Microservices is not always the goal for every solution because it will only increase the complexity of observability and sometimes introduce your latency factors also. And you have to coordinate in case of these microservices are managed by multiple teams. You have to collaborate with these teams or stakeholders who are managing the deployment and dependencies aspect and versioning aspect point of view also. So the foundational solution is not microservices every time, but you need to understand the trade-offs between monolithic and microservices depending on complexity of your application. Then, so the modular architecture should be considered as a transitional state, right? But modular is not by default equal to microservices. It's about internal service boundaries with well-defined contracts, right? For example, instance, the domain remain models inside monolith, each with independent folders, interfaces, and you have built roles, right, in alignment with your monolithic folders. What you can isolate here is, for example, in the e-commerce example, the user module, the payment module, inventory module, each owned by different teams but deployed as one. This enables parallel development without needing full infrastructure per service, right? So modular does not mean it is equal to microservices. It can mean the simplified mode of parallelizing your development effort and minimizing the complexity of managing individual logic or module. Now, how systems evolve, right? Start with clean monolith with some kind of a design principle that aligns with your domain, right? And add more module boundaries, extract services when needed, right? And then what are some of the key triggers for extraction you can consider is one is a scaling bottleneck, right? If the payment service needs a separate database, and the ownership friction. If the team is owning one service, doesn't want to wait for another team who's managing another service. And the deployment frequency differences, right? Um, all this matters depending on your actual audit-based data for billing and what reflects on your UI, right? So as a leader, your role is to arrive at or design an architecture that matches the org chart intentionally, right? So that the dependency conflicts and the deployment frequencies managed accordingly. So use and leverage your platform teams to support gradual modularization, right? Overall, what I'm trying to highlight is monoliths aren't bad. Um, at the same time, microservices aren't magical, right? So it depends on the intensity of dependencies you have to manage and take a call. What matters is how intentionally your system evolves based on scale, team ownership, and delivery velocity, depending on number of features that are delivered, whether it's a quarterly basis, monthly, or weekly. So if you're designing or leading systems at scale, right, it's not just about jumping to microservices. It's about designing your architecture to evolve smartly with the scale to handle volume involved there. So having said that, subscribe for the next episode where we cover observability first design. Why it's your foundation, why it would be your foundation for any kind of cloud native maturity. So I'll see you soon in the session. And at the same time, I want to make sure, you are actually benefiting from what I'm trying to highlight in terms of the use cases. But this is going to be very generic. If you have any specific requests in terms of what case study to highlight, please feel free to subscribe the channel at the same time, add your comment to the video. All right. Stay tuned and feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.